the flute of the outer gods, the melody that keeps the universe asleep. Bone-slick and lightless, the flute is not an instrument. It is a duty, carved from no anatomy we admit exists. It hums before lips ever touch it, a faint pressure like air remembering how to move. Its surface pulses, not with life, but with schedule. Around it drift the blind servitors of Azathoth, circling in patient orbit, mouths fixed to holes that shift like pupils. What they produce isn't music so much as containment, a thread of sound stretched thin across creation, taut as a wire, steady as a lid. The note seems gentle, it isn't. Glass shivers on distant shelves, clocks lose confidence. Scholars who scoff still wake with blood-dry ears, humming a pitch they cannot name. The tune enters rooms before anyone does and leaves last, as if checking the corners for frayed edges. Listen long enough, and your breath starts to copy it. Your thoughts fall into step. You keep time with something that has never learned ours. Priests call the melody mercy. Historians prefer older words: counterweight, gasket, seal. Both are correct, and neither is enough. The horror of the flute is not that it sings, it's that it must. The strand it spins ties night to morning, weight to orbit, reason to habit. If the breath falters, the sleeper at the center stirs. If the sleeper stirs, the knot dissolves. And when the dream notices itself, everything else becomes noise. Elder sign, starstones of Mnar. Not a charm, not a trinket. A geometry that resists teeth. The elder sign warms in the palm without heat. A faint glow that isn't light so much as refusal. Scratch it into wood, etch it into copper, stitch it under the tongue. The shape holds like a door braced with a shoulder. In caves beneath Mnar, ceilings glitter with starstones set into constellations no sailor can chart, a sky hammered underground to say no. Lore insists it came from the Dreamlands, passed from hands that had too many knuckles to hands that had too much fear. Mariners carve it into mastheads and sleep easier in seas that never forgive. Watchmen notch it into thresholds and swear the hallway gets longer when something approaches. The sign doesn't attack, it subtracts. Footsteps thin out at the border it draws. Whispers lose verbs, shadows forget where to lean. But protection collects a price. Wear it long and bone remembers other angles. Fingers find new directions to bend. Your shadow sharpens into points you don't own. Night air tastes metallic, as if the world is filing you to fit a lock you can't see. Dreams fill with clean lines and cold stars, and you wake with the certainty that corners are not innocent. The terror isn't that it fails, it's that it works by changing you. The sign keeps them out, by making room inside you. Hold it long enough and you are easier to spare, and easier to miss. Tillinghast Resonator, not a lamp, not a lens, a frequency given teeth. The resonator doesn't reveal new things so much as subtract the blindness that let you feel alone. Coils purr a violet hum, veins tremble as if tasting pressure. The air thickens until your skin understands there are more rooms inside it. Hair rises in still air. Your teeth itch like tuning forks remembering a note. Crawford Tillinghast called it expansion, an elevation of dormant sense. A hand placed gently on the pineal to wake it like an eye. The field threads your brain like wire, and the world arrives in extra directions. Curtains ripple where there is no wind. Corners grow depth like wells. Dust lifts and arranges itself into architectures you never learned to name. Something that has always been passing through you pauses, briefly, as if interrupted mid-meal. The first seconds feel holy, a revelation wrapped in science. Then the pressure tilts. Sound turns heavy. Breath forgets rhythm. Shapes slide through layered glass with patient appetite, brushing your outline to test its seams. They have never needed light. They do not need yours. When you stare, they tilt, as if amused to finally be seen by a creature that suddenly answers back. You can throw the switch. You can smash the frame. The attention does not unlearn you. Curiosity is a summons, not a shield. The moment you looked, you were located. The resonator isn't a window, it is a door you opened from both sides. Zanthu Tablets, black jade that swallows light, edges worn smooth by frightened hands. The tablets don't lie on a table so much as sink into it. Glyphs seem carved and yet still falling, as if the cuts never stop traveling downward. Touch them and the skin cools past cold into pressure. The stone feels like the first step of a descent. When a lamp is set near, the shadows don't lengthen. They lean. They were exhumed from a city already surrendering to the sea, the last work of a priest named Zanthu, who wrote prayers that read like instructions and warnings that sound like invitations. Divers brought them up in sections, cataloged the fragments, made rubbings that bled through paper in salt-colored stains. Scholars argue over the order of lines, over whether the script is history, ritual, or map. The arguments go quiet when the room starts to feel lower than it was. Reading is not learning. It is sinking. Each line tightens the ribs as though water has learned the alphabet. Ears pop on dry land. Dreams fill with stairwells that never meet a floor, with bells tolling where pressure is the only air. Readers start practicing breath holding without admitting why. They find themselves in basements, counting steps they don't remember choosing. The tablets don't command, they correct. The mind remembers gravity as a language, and the body, eager to please, follows. The horror is not the fall, it's how natural the angle feels. You think you're translating stone. It is measuring you for depth. 7 cryptical books of Hsan. Silk thin and dust sweet. The scrolls breathe when unrolled. A whisper that feels like someone leaning close to correct you. Ink that looks dry, glints wet in the dark. Margins drift a finger's width while you blink, as if the page is adjusting its reach. Characters don't just sit, they wait. Small black doors that open only when you think the wrong thought. Tradition attributes them to a scholar named Hsan, copied and recopied by hands that learn to move without sound. Fragments surface in temple stacks and merchant chests. A monastery swears it holds the 4th book, but never opens it in the same room twice. The text cites cities that no map remembers, and laws of dreaming that feel like physics with the lights off. Translators agree on nouns, argue over verbs, and stop arguing when the lamps begin to hum. Reading is not instruction. It is assessment. The page studies your answers before you write them, then revises the questions to make sure you fail correctly. You start passing tests you were never given. Simple names go missing. Preferences unravel. You pause mid-sentence, listening for approval you can't bear to lose. The more you understand, the more you taper. Edges shaved from habit, then from self, until mirrors return only compliance. The horror is not what they reveal. It's what they remove to make room. You think you are learning a language. The books prefer a cleaner subject. They do not teach. They edit. Idol of Tsathoggua. Squat, smug, and warm to the touch, the idol seems to sweat in cold rooms, as if remembering a different climate. Stone should not feel this soft. It gives under the thumb, then springs back, leaving the faint impression of your print like a tasting. Set it down and shadows thicken around its base, pooling the way grease pools in an unlit pan. Miners claimed they hauled it up from a shaft that never ended, a vent into Nikai where the walls tasted of old breath. The name Tsathoggua shows up in ledgers no one remembers writing. Doodles that look like crouching things with patient smiles. Antiquarians argue about material, basalt, obsidian, something older that pretends. Everyone agrees on the smell, damp, sweet, as if the room has been chewing with its mouth closed. Owners stop rushing meals. Then they stop rushing anything. Knees prefer bending. Tongues feel heavy and pleased. Sleep grows thick and savory. Dreams arrive slow and sticky, with a sound like lips parting in the dark. You wake hungry for corners and basements. You keep the idol near the floor without deciding to. It never moves. It never needs to. Your marrow listens. Your marrow learns. Soon, silence has flavor. The horror isn't what it asks. It's what you volunteer. You think you're keeping a relic. The relic is keeping you, softening, seasoning, saving. By the time you notice, you've already been tasted. Relia text. Waterlogged and salt-puckered, the book leaves damp rings wherever it rests. Its spine grits like shoreline sand. Open to any page and the lines look steady. Wait for the tide and they slant, realigning themselves to a rhythm you feel first in your teeth. The ink refuses to be dry. It glistens as if waiting for the moon to nod. Priests in drowned ages compiled it, or so the margins insist, naming a city that rises wrong and sleeps on the seabed like a held breath. Relia. The script resembles ropes and currents, knots tied into sentences that loosen when the air turns briny. Sailors swear the paragraphs smell stronger near bay windows. Archivists seal it in glass. The condensation forms on the inside, beating like sweat on a fever. Reading does not teach. It navigates. Words slide into numbers, numbers into bearings, bearings into roads that have no land to cross. Your house takes on harbor sounds, gull cries in still air, a bell where there is no buoy. You taste iron at noon. You dream of maps that rewrite themselves while you watch, coasts smearing into spirals, depths labeled with verbs. Before you realize you're packing, your boots stand by the door, pointing east. The book hums at low tide the way a throat hums before a name. The horror isn't that it calls. It's that you already know the way. It does not summon the city. It reminds the city where to meet you, and it always remembers the hour. Book of Azathoth. Black and colder than thought, the grimoire throws no reflections, only a faint refusal where light should rest. Pages flex like sheet metal under glacier skin. The first leaf is blank except for a narrow line, perfect as a scalpel, space for a name drawn with the patience of an orbit. When you touch the margin, your fingers steam in summer rooms. No catalog claims it, yet auction ledgers carry its shadow. Lots withdrawn, buyers who forgot why they came. Legends insist it predates text. That language copied its posture from whatever this is. The few notes that survive describe ink that isn't a liquid so much as a temperature. The book hums at a frequency teeth misunderstand, a bass that feels like a ceiling somewhere very far away, lowering 1 inch. Reading isn't possible in the usual sense. Your eyes don't move. Your consent does. Letters align with the rhythm of a drum too huge to own a direction. Thoughts click into a sequence you mistake for clarity. Equations forgive themselves. Fear folds neatly. Then the signature line looks reasonable, merely administrative, and the pen in your hand is heavier than it was. Afterward, you hear a second heartbeat, distant and colossal, measuring you into meter. Doors open that weren't there. You feel included. The horror is not the binding. It's the enrollment. The book isn't read, it files you. Your name becomes a note in a song that must not pause. If the center wakes, you are counted in the noise. Culte de Goules. Leather creaks like old teeth when the book opens, and the margins are busy. Dates, places, weather underfoot. At first, it reads like a field journal. Soil conditions, the manners of cemeteries, which prayers make the earth polite. Then, the tone warms. The author stops explaining who the correspondents are. You've met them, surely. Below the candles. Attributed to a decadent of the 17th century or a liar with better stories, it passes through hands that don't advertise. Booksellers remember the smell, clove and cold stone, and forget the face that bought it. The plates are delicately etched. Galleries of skulls, catacombs mapped like neighborhoods, tables laid for more guests than the room admits, a recipe or two, if you read slant. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Practice alters the voice. Yours. Meals shrink to broths. Midnight walks take you where you meant not to go. You learn to answer knocks from under the floor by waiting, then knocking back, softly, with 2 fingers. The dead are patient conversationalists. They ask your name as if it's a favor you've been withholding. The last chapters stop using ink. Pages turn themselves in rooms you believed were empty. You swear you hear the nib scratching anyway. The horror isn't the communion. It's the commitment it assumes. Open the book, and you're halfway through. Close it, and the conversation continues. Only now the replies come from below. Revelations of Glaaki. 12 volumes bound in cloth that never dries, each spine rasping with grit as if the lake keeps sending it back. The pages ripple even when pressed, lines wavering like reeds in a patient wind. Hold a book long enough and your palms shine damp, no matter the season. The title is a whisper the water repeats against stone. Revelations. They were written, the faithful claim, by disciples who did not stop being useful when their hearts did. Each volume teaches a virtue you didn't ask to practice. Stillness, listening, surrender, depth. By the 3rd, you can tell which ripple belongs to you and which doesn't. By the 5th, mirrors thicken. Your reflection lags a breath, as if learning to breathe through a filter. Few reach the 12th without developing a careful affection for the shore at night. Reading is an entry, not a study. Words lay thin films across thought like oil, catching light in colors that were never yours. Scars grow glossy. Sleep comes with the sound of pins sliding into soft wood. You place your shoes by the door, pointing toward the water, and can't remember when the habit started. When it rains, you stand very still, listening for a voice under the hiss. It is always there. It is always patient. The horror isn't drowning. It's the welcome you feel on the way down. Those who finish do not close the book. They close over it. And the lake keeps reading.
Subscribe for more interesting stuff. Tell us your experience in the comments.